Good afternoon and welcome to the link. And today we discuss US versus Venezuela. Why are China and Russia so quiet? Colombia steps in and the Caribbean on edge. We are ready to go. I hope you are ready. This is some serious times we're in today. And I tell you, we're in for some great discussion today. All right. So folks, today we turn our eyes to a bold escalation, I should say, a bold escalation that is playing out on our doorsteps. It's a wave of military strikes. I tell you, this has us all on edge, okay? The strikes launched by the United States in international waters, and collectively we ask, why is the spotlight now sweeping the Caribbean and Latin America? And where do global heavyweights like China and Russia fit into this picture? Just today, the US struck two vessels in the Eastern Pacific, its eighth confirmed strike in a widening campaign against alleged drug smuggling networks. And some people might put that in quotation. They're not too convinced that it's about drug smuggling networks. In the region, tensions are mounting. Venezuela has responded with force and rhetoric. Colombia has publicly pulled its ambassador. And right here in the Caribbean, questions swirl. Why has Grenada's Prime Minister delayed his stance? Will Trinidad and Tobago continue to back the US unconditionally, as its Prime Minister recently pledged? Today, we unpack it all with two special guests, Chester Humphrey from Grenada and Carlos Ron from Venezuela. So sit back, relax, and I can't tell you to enjoy because, oh my goodness, this one is having us where we are at the edge of our seats. And as I said earlier, Grenada's government, led by Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell, has not yet given an official response. And we want to discuss that today. And it's prompting both public concern and protests. Grenadans remember 1983. How many of you remember 1983, when the US troops invaded their island after the death of Prime Minister Maurice Bishop? An event that still divides opinions today. Meanwhile, in Trinidad and Tobago, Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar openly backed the US operation, saying the Caribbean must take a stand against drug cartels. But we know her support has drawn regional backlash, with critics accusing her of betraying Caribbean community. We want to talk about that today. Has she really betrayed Caribbean unity? What about Edward Seaga during the Reagan era, where he firmly sided with Washington? So has Kamala really, betrayed Caribbean unity? What about Barbados, who played a behind-the-scenes role during the Grenada invasion, allowing U.S. aircraft staging access? You forgot that? Against the same Grenada. This was during Tom Adams' era. I want to discuss that today. We want to discuss that today. And St. Vincent and the Grenadines under Milton Cato. I want to ask Ernesto Cook, my co-host from St. Vincent Times, about that. What about Milton Cato, who quietly aligned with Reagan's administration despite public unease? So is Kamala the only one? Why all guns out at Kamala? Today, Venezuela is mobilizing troops along its Caribbean coast and warning that the strikes could be a prelude to regional aggression. But guess what? Colombia has recalled its ambassador to Washington in protest. And all of this is happening while China and Russia have been publicly silent. Intelligence reports suggest quiet diplomatic coordination and increased naval observation in the region, which signals that silence does not mean inaction. We're going to talk about that today. So again, we have our guests due to come into the studio, Chester Humphrey from Grenada and Carlos Ron from Venezuela. And we're going to have a really robust chat today. I can tell this is going to be quite interesting, especially as it relates to Trinidad. You know, I can hear Kamla saying, "Why is everybody on my back?" You know, Barbados supported, provided a military base for the U.S. I want to hear your thoughts on that as I wait on my first guest. I see Mr. Ernesto Cook, and I want to have these discussions with him because I know, you know, he's a man very have strong opinions on these things. So I would love to have that. That discussion. Why is everybody out, almost like they're out to get Kamla? You know, what about Edward Seaga? As a Jamaican, I can tell you he was firmly behind the US, you know, and yeah, he was working alongside the US. Those are the allegations, and we see what would have happened in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. What about that? A lot of people are asking, what about that? Yes, let me read some of your comments. Anybody, any thoughts about that? Should we lay off of Kamla a little bit, seeing that Barbados, Tom Adams, and I mean, that has gone down in history, that Barbados provided that military base for the invasion of Grenada. And we've lived and survived that. Medical ships are needed in stemming non-communicable disease with our students and senior citizens around. I just picked up that comment. Not sure what it's about. Hi, good afternoon, Shirley. Rashid is saying China and Russia will not help him. But I'm seeing in the Jamaica, in the newspaper, the Jamaica newspaper, in the Jamaica newspaper, I'm seeing that that's not necessarily so. Because they're quiet does not really mean that there's not a lot of work happening behind the scenes. Let me see if I can get this article from the Jamaica newspaper, right? Having a little difficulty with it there, but number one said Russia is too busy fighting their own war and China is protecting their southern border from the US bases in Japan. Interesting. You know, if these are allies, I would say Maduro would probably need to take a second look there. Are these real allies, or is it that they're working in the background? Yes, I see Mr. Cook is ready. Let me. Oh, it's good to have him join us early. Good afternoon, Mr. Cook.
Yeah. Good afternoon to you, Marcia. Are you hearing me?
Setting up. You're still setting up.
No, you go right ahead. I'm ready. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go.
Right. I was hearing some feedback there.
Let me make sure. Let me make sure that that I think I know what it is.
Yes, but it's better now. It's way better now. We don't hear it anymore. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I have, as soon as you sit in that seat, I want to ask you. I hear you on the show, and on your show too. That's St. Vincent Times, which I mean, you had an awesome program last night. I must say, but you know, you are always at Kamla. Huh? You are always at Kamla. Is Kamla the first in the Caribbean to side with the US? What about in your own country, sir? What about Milton Cato in your own country?
Well, Kamla is not the first to side with the Americans, but we are living in a different paradigm. And Um, we are living in the age where politicians like Kamala would have
Mm,
told us to remove the shackles of slavery. And that is part of removing the shackles of slavery, not bowing to an empire.
mm-hmm.
So that is why I'm at her throat every Monday morning. And she is she is causing a lot of pain for her own people. And politicians don't see what they do wrong until they're outside of office. Most
Mm-hmm.
of them think that when they're in and they do something, it is to the betterment of a country. They say, well, I had to do it because I was the leader at that time, right? So it's when they're out, they realize the trouble they had caused for people in general.
Yeah.
So clearly, she's not been advised properly, but that's beside the point. Um, yeah, well, the Grenada invasion, a lot of countries took part in that,
Mm-hmm.
and they sided with the Americans at the time. And I don't know if you remember the chairman of the OECS at the time was Eugenia Charles of Dominica.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
She was the one who announced the invasion with Reagan on October 25th. And,
Mm-hmm.
and of course, the OECS nations, they don't have military forces, but they contributed about, I think it was close to 300 constables at the time to the force.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and so all of that happened. And then Reagan said that he had ordered the US forces to invade after four countries in the OECS. Of course, Antigua was one, Dominica,
Mm-hmm.
St. Lucia, and St. Vincent. And they were joined by Jamaica and Barbados. And he said that at the time, they had urgently requested US help in restoring order and democracy in Grenada. And he said he acted because Americans on the island, mostly medical students, were in grave danger. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
we know today that that was one big hullabaloo and a big lie.
Right.
They couldn't take what was happening in the region in terms of the countries, and because even at that time, countries in the region had started to look to their own destiny and not want to be
Yes.
bound by the empire, whether it be England or America. So, but that's America for you. But those countries did participate in it. It was from my understanding, listening to people like or asking people like Rav Gonzalez who have been around at the time, and
Mm-hmm.
other politicians who have greater history. It was a battle royal. It was something that he said that Milton didn't really want to contribute to. It was a lot of back and forth. They had some tumbling in the cabinet. I mean, Ralph was not inside of the cabinet, but he would know this because he's a love of history, and he would have known the politics. But I was hearing that from more than one scholars that there was a lot of tumbling in the cabinet, a lot of fighting over that. They didn't want to do it. They didn't want to engage in that, in part
Mm-hmm.
in that. But of course, when the big boys call and
Right.
you are eating at the trough, sometimes you have to decide whether it's you or your life. And
Right.
some
Yeah. Yeah.
people decide to go that way. But yes, OECS countries did participate in that. They sent forces, constables, and
Mm-hmm.
um, and also you had about, I think it was at the time, the story was that you had about 30 Soviets in Grenada, whom the United States also pledged to protect. And I think Cuba had probably around 700 Cuban construction workers on the island. But the US forces, I think from history, they said that they had captured about 600 Cubans during the October 28th date. And a lot of things were up and down. But I guess our folks from Grenada, we expect to be on the program, would give us a more greater history of what is happening on the islands down inside there. So I look forward to their contribution to the program and what they have to say, and looking forward to learning from them. But like I said, yes, these islands did participate in the force that they had on Grenada at the time. So it's not an easy thing, but that is what happens. And I'm hopeful now that we're in a different time period where our leaders that we have can actually think outside of the box. They can be more independent of thought, and also, would know how to work around such things if they have been bullied. Because I believe right now that we have to have leaders who consider a number of things. One, if a US visa is more important than developing regional what do you call it there, regional tourism, traveling within the region. So there we have to have leaders now who have to consider, is it a visa, is a visa that important, or building tourism in the region? Our people as well have to consider now and start asking themselves, is it much better to build our regional tourism or fly to the United States and give them money that we don't have ourselves in this region? Number two, we have to have leaders here also who have to start thinking, and also citizens, whether it is not more viable to start planting more of our own grown own food, selling our own food within the region, becoming a more healthy people, than importing billions of dollars of canned foods from the United States of America or the European Union. We have to start having leaders who are start thinking like this. Because the more we talk, it seems like it's the more we see the same thing over and over, where we have leaders who said we are pushing towards 2025, we're pushing towards 2026 and 2028, where we should be self-sustaining. And it's just like a talk over and over and over again. And the same thing, right? It's the same thing that we're having. People just talking over and over and over again on the same thing all the time at a CARICOM meeting, at a OECS meeting. It's just like, so our leaders now have to come to the point where they can say, look, this is more important than having importing food. Regional travel is more important than spending thousands of dollars going to the United States of America every Monday morning. Or people going there. We just have to consider a lot of different things. So that is where we are in the grand scheme of things. But I just wanted to put that there as an opening salvo for the discussions that we'll be having. I'm not sure if we will be having our friends from the Grenada join us. As I don't know how soon they'll be joining us, but I look forward to having them on the program and listening to what they have to say. So Marcia, it's back to you as my opening salvo I had there. Not sure. It looks like Marcia dropped out. I'm not sure what's happening. Looks like we lost Marcia. I hope everything is okay over there. Let me see if I could get back onto her immediately. I'm going to try and call her live. I'm not sure what's happening, but looks like we lost her. I'm not sure if it's the internet that dropped out on her end, but well. I'm working on the. Okay. All right. It appears that Marcia doing some work in the background there, so we'll continue. All right. Yeah. So that was my opening salvo, really, and to see in terms of what's happening with our region. I have to come back to this whole issue here that I pointed out to this morning. Somebody was telling me that that there was a plane that is circling St. Vincent for the entire morning. Yeah, I got some information about that. I'm trying to get the actual information as to what aircraft it is. We have that from time to time, but I'm trying to get right. I'm trying to get the exact information on what was really going on. Right. Someone says, what are people even going to that violent dump for? Okay. Yeah. So that is the situation I was speaking to.
I'm back.
Go ahead.
Really sorry about that. I was making sure our guest was having, it's a live show, and our guest was having some challenges coming in, but I'm seeing him there, and we're so excited that Mr. Chester Humphrey is right here with us. He is Senator Honorable Chester Arlington Arthur Humphrey. Oh my goodness, his mom gave him some strong names there. Right. Absolutely. And he's the President General of the Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union and member of the House of Senate in the Parliament of Grenada. And oh my goodness, there's so much that in terms of his work as a union president of his union, He's also the first vice president of the Great Grenada Trades Union Council, which affiliates all 8 trade unions in Grenada. He has held this post for 2 consecutive terms. So we really have a heavy hitter with us today. And without any further ado, we want to welcome Mr. Chester Humphrey. I think he's still trying to settle himself. I see him settling, so I'll wait until he's completely settled.
Well, I'm happy. I'm happy to have Chester on the program. I think we will learn a great deal from his wealth of knowledge today. I have listened to him. I've listened to him on various programs before,
Yes,
and heard him enunciate on a number of matters. And I think he has a wealth of knowledge that I'm always interested in hearing and learning. These are the people I really like to hear. You know, people say they like to hear me talk, but I like to hear those people.
yes.
And
They got the real history. They got the real
yes,
history. So
yes, that's right.
I want him, Mr. Humphrey, Senator Humphrey, if you could put your thumb up when you're ready. if you're settled. Oh, wonderful. Oh,
Yes,
we're
yes.
excited. We are excited. Good afternoon, Senator Humphrey. Oh, goodness. Thank you for joining the link today with myself, Marcia Weeks, and Ernesta Cook of St. Vincent Times. It's a pleasure having you here, sir.
Well, let me first of all thank you for inviting me onto this program. It is always a privilege to be able to speak not only to the people of your nation state, but also to speak to the citizens of the region. And these new technological platforms empower us to do so.
That's right.
Because one of the instruments of control is isolation and division, right? So we are not able to connect physically because our connectivity with the demise of DF has by and large collapsed. The exorbitant cost in being able to move to each other's countries has limited us significantly. So we are very much embedded with an isolationism and insularity, and we have not been able to break loose of the harness of colonialism and slavery that has kept us ideologically and culturally apart
Yes.
with unfounded biases which frame our outlook. Right? It is the most masterful instrument that they have used to repress African peoples. Yeah, and they have been fairly very successful. But these platforms now allow us to break out of those chains, so to speak.
Yes, sir.
Comrade on the other side there, I listened to you in a video chat that I have circulated.
Seem to be having some technical challenges there. Wow.
That we are saddled with. They are increasing prices but decreasing service. So there's an inconsistency in the internet here. So
I see.
I couldn't get on my laptop and I'm using my phone.
Yes. Yes. Well, sir, we particularly wanted to have a talk with you concerning Grenada and what is the present state of affairs right now. I know that. Oh, look, it's spinning. Okay, you're muted, Ernesto.
Sorry. That is the consequences of us, always having to depend on the internet coming out of the
Yes.
United
You know
States of
what?
America.
I'm going to. I think I'm just going to call him and
Yeah,
let him.
maybe you should. Yeah, But
We just call him because I think he has a lot to say today.
yeah, we
Uh,
need to hear from him. We need to hear from
let's
him.
see if we can, guys. We want you to please stay with us, please. Thank you so much. Um,
Yeah, I just fell off, so I don't know what occurred a few
yes.
moments ago.
Yeah, but you
Yeah.
fell off. What we're going to do, I'm sorry, if it happens again, I will just give you a phone call and we try to let you speak to us via phone, okay? But because we
Yeah, you can
really
do so on WhatsApp.
yeah,
Yeah.
we really want to hear you. So I was asking, I was saying that we are very interested in Grenada's stance at this particular time. We are not hearing anything official from Grenada as to their stance. We're seeing the protests, and we know that generally, the citizens in Grenada are not for this. For the airport to be used in such a way in terms of being, to house any kind of military strike, etc. But we're not hearing anything from a response from the government, whether it's yay or nay. So we just want you to shed some light on that, and also just to tell us what's the present situation in Grenada at this moment.
Well, firstly, you are not alone in not hearing anything. We, the citizens, have not heard from our government. The Prime Minister has been out of the country all week, last week, and part of week before, I think. He seemed to be more always out than in. And we have heard nothing except we haven't heard anything except that on Sunday, at an event called Heroes Day, which I refer to as the Day of Solemnity, which is October the 19th. For the very first time since the demise of the Grenada Revolution, um, we are having an October Heroes event. No heroes yet have been named, but it's held on a day in which Morris and others unfortunately lost their lives in an interscene explosion that happened here. And for the very first time that we are marking this day, it's a solemn day for all of Grenada, and for the region, and for the world in many respects. And it's a day in which it is a solemn day because on this day, officially, no permission is given to have any kind of other cultural activities, no open events, and so on, to mark this tragedy that occurred in our history. Um, the event should have come off on Saturday last, which is actually October the 19th, but unfortunately we had severe inclement weather with thunderstorms and a lot of rain. So the event was postponed, and then it was held on the Sunday. Um, and at that occasion, the Prime Minister, having returned to the country, said that he would make an announcement before the week is up. He indicated that this request came since August and they have been sitting on it. We only learned about it when WPG 10 broke the news about 2.5 to 3 weeks ago. The only politician to have spoken so far is the Honorable Peter David, who is about to launch a new political formation called The Movement. And he issued a statement in which he said that Grenada ought not to be partner in the invasion of a sovereign Caribbean country. And the irony of all ironies is that the Americans, who first accused us of building a air base so that Russia could attack America, are the ones now who want to convert this base into a military takeoff point. I remember the occasion when Ronald Reagan addressed the nation, producing satellite imagery and all of that, um, claiming that there was a submarine base being built under the airport and that Grenada was now a threat to the United States from a military point of view and so on. And then he claimed that during the period of the crisis, although the British confirmed that the American students or no American citizen or other citizen on the island during that period, tumultuous period, faced any unusual threat to the person, because the British did not evacuate anybody. The Canadians didn't evacuate anybody. No other Caribbean country evacuated anybody. In fact, the British Embassy informed the Foreign Office that things had been very quiet in Grenada and there's no individualized threat to any citizen. Yet the Americans committed to Grenada, the largest per capita force of military forces that the Americans have ever committed to any war. Because remember, it was a fleet that was rotating out of Lebanon at the time when they blew up an American base and killed over 200 and something Marines. It was that fleet that was rotating, heading towards Lebanon, that was diverted to come to Grenada, right? But as usual, the Americans are known to lie, and to lie repeatedly. So in the Spanish-American War, the Americans blew up their own ship in the Havana harbor and used that as a pretext. In the Gulf of Tonkin incident in around 1962, 1961, 63, somewhere thereabouts, the Americans, the Gulf of Tonkin incident, attacked their own ship and used that in order to declare war on Vietnam. Then, of course, we have the most infamous weapons of mass destruction, right? When a black American senior military personnel went before the UN General Assembly with maps and satellitery showing the places where Saddam Hussein had these weapons of mass destruction. Another lie again. That lie revealed itself, and we know Tony Blair and all the Western world, all right, were involved in invading Iraq. They executed Saddam, and no weapons were ever found. Then another lie again. America's longest war was based on a lie. When Bush and everybody knew that the Taliban and Al Qaeda were dead enemies. Yet he claimed that the Taliban was involved in the assault on 9/11. Another lie again. And so it keeps going and going and going. Then we remember how they dealt with Noriega. They then falsely charged Noriega with drugs trafficking. They hauled him before, and they charged him, indicted him in an American court. Then they invaded Panama, took out Noriega, tried him, and had him tied up until he died in prison. The playbook in Venezuela is the same. They charged President Maduro with trafficking in drugs, and that indictment was brought in a court in Florida. No evidence presented, just an indictment on a fully trumped up charge. And as usual, America has done this. It has a history of lies. And what's worse, it's what is being done now in preparation for war against Venezuela is done by a convicted felon, a known established liar as a president, who is telling us that Venezuela, these small boats, could you imagine a nuclear submarine with cruise missiles, F-16s, a whole squadron of them, America's most advanced fighter aircraft, B-52 bombers, again, that can use nuclear weapons, and 10,000 Marines of the 82nd Airborne Division based in Puerto Rico, and some of them are dispersed. Some I understand is heading to Trinidad, all right, where we have a particular drunk that's on board this thing against, ostensibly is about containing the narco trade. But so far, the Americans have failed to provide any evidence whatsoever that these little craft did indeed possess narcotics. In any event, these were small crafts heading in the Trinidad direction, not in the US direction, yet they have been blown out of the water. I think there were 26 people so far have been murdered, including 2 Trinidadians. They claim that they rescued some survivors, none of whom were Venezuelans. One, I think they said, was from Colombia. And rather than send him to the United States to face trial for drug trafficking, they sent him home. That's according to the latest reports that we have. Now, why Grenada? Grenada because what the US needs, the US high tech military, and let me just say this, the playbook I see unfolding in the Venezuela scenario is taken from the leaf of what happened in Panama and what we've recently seen unfolding in the Holocaust meted out against the Palestinian people by no other than Zionist Israel. I don't anticipate that the Americans are planning a long-term war in Venezuela. Venezuela is fairly a large country, ideal for a guerrilla type campaign. I don't think that's what the Americans are planning. The American planners are going for a surgical strike, very much in keeping with the technological warfare that you see exhibited by Israel against Palestine. And hence the 10,000 troops. They have now secured and cut off the maritime border of Venezuela, right? So nothing can actually go in and nothing can actually come out. Now notice, and let's be clear on this, while the Americans is the head of the spear, this entire operation is an extension of Europe, right? It's an extension of white Western Europe. In other words, post.
Okay, so he's stuck there, but guys, this is it's so good, Ernesto.
Yeah, I, I
Go
didn't,
right ahead.
I didn't want to, I didn't want to, disturb him because he was really
I
on
tell
track.
you.
I like when I like to hear guys like these with the wealth of knowledge that I don't have, talk about the situation in a more in-depth manner. And I don't like to cut their concentration with the questions. Um, I I wanted to ask him about the whole issue of Mitchell, the Prime Minister, who had
Hmm.
stated that he would make an announcement, and then now I'm hearing it's Tuesday next week again. It's put off. That's what
Yeah.
I was hearing, and I want to ask him what is his thoughts as to does he think that the CIA has gotten to him? If the Americans has a file that they had shown in Deacon that he doesn't know about himself, because this is how they do business. They come to Marcia and they say, Marcia, hold this. You could open this and read through this. And by the time you open the file and you see what is in the file and you think that nobody knew, you just
Yeah.
capitulate and you say, okay, all right, all right, all right. So I was wondering if they got a file on him because it just seemed as if he's just backtracking and like because I heard him said something on a program about Grenada doesn't have a military. So when somebody brings a military question to the government, you have to think long and hard as to that doesn't make no sense to me because
From August till now?
no, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense at all. They went to Gaston and they asked Gaston basically the same question. And Gaston said, no, point blank, I have no time with that right now. Not yet. So I don't see why Deacon is still going around the Mulberry tree talking about, this and that, we don't have this and we don't have that. So I'm just wondering, these are genuine questions that people are asking now. Does the Americans have a file on Mr. Mitchell that we don't know about? Are they threatening him? Are they saying that we will cut off some kind of supply to Grenada, something he's getting from America? I don't know if they're getting anything. I know that, and I made mention of this before. There are several countries in this region that has the CBI program, right? Which gets a wealth of money to run their economies without borrowing a lot of loans, right? And I noticed that out of the last set of reports that came up in the Washington Post, in the New York Times, whatever it is, I would see Antigua name, I would see St. Kitts, I would see St. Lucia, I would see Dominica, but I would not see in Grenada. And I was kind of wondering, why is it that they're leaving Grenada out of the loop? Because they're a CBI country. And now I understand why they were leaving them out of the loop. Because they were actually baiting them. Look, we didn't put you in this, so you have to pay us back in kind, So I'm wondering if all of these things were discussions that were taking place behind the scenes, which we don't know about. And now that time has come, you have to play this kind of game, wait and see thing with him, and if it's something they're working out behind the scenes. I don't know, Marcia. It's just genuine questions everybody has, because if someone make a request for you to use your country to put down a radar facility, which will be used basically for the invasion of another sovereign nation, it's a simple yes or no question. You say, listen, boss, me and then that. Sorry, we ain't getting involved in people's sovereign matters. You could do your business however you want to do your business. Trinidad is close by. You could put 10 million radar in Trinidad if you want to. So, but we're not hearing it. And Deacon's, I don't know what's going on in his head. I don't know, but
very, very strange response.
Yeah,
but I see Senator Chester Humphrey is back, and we're gonna go. We're gonna get him right back
The
on.
internet is back. Yeah. So let me just finish what I was saying. The American strategy in Venezuela is a surgical hit.
Right.
And Maduro and the top echelons of the Bolivarian revolution have got to be very, very, very careful. As at the moment, because Trump has made it clear that he's instructed the CIA to get inside Venezuela, make preparations for taking out the government, and of course, he's going to take the oil. He said so from day one. He's not interested in a long stay. As he said in Iraq, they would not have gone in and stayed that long. They just go in and seize the oil. And so this is what is motivating this, and this is what is playing out here. So we can expect a surgical strike. No, the problem the Americans have is that the American military planners quite often don't get it right. So they may discover that this surgical high-tech operations that they are planning for Venezuela may very well go wrong. Wow. The question is, why do they need Grenada? There's a suggestion that they could go to Trinidad because they have open political invitation. But you've got to understand, the purpose of having a nuclear submarine is the use of cruise missiles. Now, these are very sophisticated, highly accurate munitions, and it needs, and they are guided. When the submarine is just the cover for launching an unexpected attack from an unknown location. Okay, and the speed with which these things travel and the short distance with which they have travel give you a counter strike of interception almost impossible. That's why they have a nuclear submarine. No, these things are guided by satellite technology. Grenada's geography is ideal to place the down station that will get the signals from the satellite and then feed it back to those who are controlling the missiles. So a submarine will fire from certain depths. All it does is fire. It goes up into the air. It doesn't guide. Can't guide from the bottom of the sea. What takes over is a satellite tree. And Grenada is needed simply because Grenada is geographically ideal to synchronize the satellite with the down station. So what they want to put here is part of a vital military asset. Okay. It is actually the brain of the military system, all right, of the munition system that they want to put here. So it's not placing it any other place. Of course, if they don't get Grenada, then they'll have to do it the second best, all right? But then that could lead to all kinds of questions. It can lead to counter-jamming operations. And I'm certain with the help of friendly governments, Venezuela would have been preparing itself carefully, right? My worry is, and if the colleagues in Venezuela follow closely what has happened, how the Israelis have executed their Holocaust against the Palestinians in Palestine, the accuracy of what they have done in Lebanon and other places tells you the Americans are going for a surgical hit. So they want to lick off the entire military leadership, the entire Americans are planning here, they are just despair. Make no mistake, the last announcement of the Peace Prize going to one of the prominent opposition persons in Venezuela, primarily a woman, who is an extension of the Zionist movement, who has been calling for the invasion of Venezuela, who has been calling for increasing sanctions against Venezuela, and who has been praising Netanyahu. Notice, she has received the Nobel Peace Prize. And the reason for giving her the Nobel Peace Prize is that they are sanitizing her so that when the time is right, they can then announce that she is recognized, having taken out Maduro and so on, she is recognized now as the legitimate interim president. That is what this is all about. This thing is well coordinated and planned. It's not per chance, right? So the question which arises for us, and happy am I to report that the vast majority of Grenadians see through this scam that the Americans are here to fight and interdict cocaine, which is what the drunken Trinidad who holds on to this line, hook, sinker, and even the whole fishing pole is regurgitating in order to get an accommodation for the Caribbean people to buy in to the American planned assault on Venezuela. Well, this whole thing has been exposed. My comrade, you have exposed this very well in the same piece that I made reference to. So we are all doing our part to do so. Okay? And this is where this program is important, that we've got to understand. So we have maintained, CARICOM has maintained, with the absence of Trinidad, that Caribbean should remain a zone of peace. The drunk, not understanding the concept, starts talking about domestic murder rate. Well, the domestic murder rate has nothing to do with the concept of the zone of peace. The zone of peace is a concept which regulates the relationship between states. And it's based on the fundamental principle of the recognition of sovereignty and the promotion of peace. It has nothing to do with whatever murders happening inside your country. No one is denying that we have a serious problem in our individual countries with illicit drugs. No one is denying that. No one is denying that we have signed, and I have no difficulty with that, with the Americans, different cooperation agreements, because let me put it to you this way. The final destination of all of these, of the narco business, is nowhere in the Caribbean because we don't have the scale of economy to make this profitable.
Yes.
The final destination in the narco trade is Europe and North America.
Yes.
And if it's a trade, it's not just a one-way trade because up goes the narcotics and down come the weapons. Right, so the Americans are very much a part. The Americans are very much a part of the problems that we have here. Now, there are some backward, ill-informed people, opportunists of the worst types. I refer to them as the Botolese of the apartheid period. In other words, classical prostitutes who are of the view that the government should give the Americans what they want because Grenada is in no position to fight America, and that in return we should beg the Americans for visa-free entry into the United States.
So hold on,
we should
there. Senator Humphrey, I want to hear a lot more about that because the impression that you would get is that most, 99% of Grenada is not for this request. But before you
No, you're correct. You're correct. 99.9%. 99.9% of
before you go any further, because we had a technical difficulty we have with us, Carlos Ron, and I would love if you could just wait a bit with us on the program.
Sure.
Yeah, he's actually in Venezuela right now, and he's the coordinator for the Nuestra America office of the Tricontinental Institute for Social Research. He's a former Venezuelan diplomat who served as Vice Minister for North America from 2018 to 2025, just the other day. He's also been president of the Simon Bolivar Institute for Peace and Solidarity Among Peoples. And as a diplomat, he served both in the United States and Brazil. And we are so happy to have Mr. Carlos Ron with us here on the link this afternoon. Ernesta Cook, who is my co-host here. on the link. And today we want to hear from you, Mr. Ron. What is your perspective on this U.S. Venezuelan conflict? And you are right there in Venezuela, and we're eager to hear. We want to know what is the most important point that you would want the Caribbean to know. What is it you want the Caribbean to know today? Are you satisfied with the response of the Caribbean governments in this issue? Those are the first few questions, and then I know that we will have some more for you. But we are thrilled to have you here. So welcome to the link.
Well, thank you very much, Marcia, and it's an honor to be here with your distinguished guests. The first thing I have to say, I agree with some of the words I've heard. I'm sorry I came in late into the conversation, but I agree that primarily this is a regime change of operation. This is not a drug issue, as we all know. International reports say that drug trafficking towards the United States is about 87% on the Pacific Ocean, not on this side of the world. So we know that when you deploy all these military equipment and operations, obviously there's another purpose to this. We also, because we are part of Latin America and the Caribbean, we know the history of our continent. It's for over 200 years. It's been a history of intervention. I don't think any country in this region can say that it has not seen at some point some attempt of intervention. You asked me what I think the most important thing is, for us to discuss with our brothers and sisters in the Caribbean. I think it's that what's a risk here is the peace of our region, because an intervention in Venezuela would definitely have an outcome. Of course, Venezuela would be ready and willing to resist, but any country would be willing to resist a foreign invasion. But then how this is going to play out in for the rest of the region, how just this size of military operation. I mean, the notion that was just mentioned before, the importance of this being a zone of peace. It's been so hard for us to achieve this. I mean, there was such an effort to during the last several years to try to appease the process in Colombia, the internal conflict in Colombia, so that we can declare this a continent that is free of armed struggle. We can't allow this to go on again. And I think that obviously I would like every country in this continent to take a stronger stand against U.S. intervention. But I have to say that denying access for U.S. military to deploy equipment in different zones of the Caribbean, I think is an important position and something that we respect as Venezuelan citizens. And I think that's that's what we should aim for. To really raise consciousness about the damaging effects that this will have. I mean, we're talking about migratory problems, because of course any armed conflict leads to a surge in migration. If that's their main concern, as President Trump has said, that is the most important problem in the country, then you got to think about what a military intervention would do to migration. You have to think about the environmental damage that a military intervention does, and of course, what it means for everyday people. And one of I close with this, but one of the most horrific things that is going on is that we're seeing an operation in the Caribbean, and now apparently in some parts of the Pacific too. But we're seeing this operation where people have been murdered because there has been no process, no judicial process, no interdiction, no way to know what was in the ships, who was transiting in those ships. Were they migrants? Were they fishermen? Who were they? We cannot allow, as a civilized world, for international law to be violated to this extent.
Yeah. I thank you so much for that introduction there. Ernesto, I believe you have a question for Mr.
Yeah. I will. Well, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. I was just really looking forward to hearing from on the ground in Venezuela as well. One of the things that I'm concerned about is the response of Caribbean governments or CARICOM on the issue. Um, it's been a divided one. I've seen it. We've seen it. So I am trying to get from you. Are you satisfied with the response that you've seen from CARICOM as a whole, or Caribbean government on a whole? Are you satisfied?
Well, like I said before, I think we hope for a stronger position in this, because I think it is important that always
Yeah.
that to denounce any sort of military action. In particular, I've seen some important positions. I know Antigua and Barbuda did not
Yeah.
accept this military intervention, for
Right.
example. And then you can contrast that with the case of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, in the case of Trinidad and Tobago, it's unfortunate that they keep on using the excuse, the pretext of drug trafficking, as if this is what's really going on. And I don't deny that there is, of course, in the region, the drug trafficking is an issue, but this is not, it's not the main place where it takes
Yeah.
place. And unfortunately, I think Trinidad right now just realized, because two other fishermen, I believe, were, lost as part
Yeah.
of this operation, how, the human cost of this. So I think that should call everyone to reflect on why they need to take a stronger position in stopping this type of operation. I mean, Venezuela has always been ready to cooperate with drug interdiction, with whatever, but not, but you cannot force this. And again, this is not the real issue. If this was the real issue, there are other ways to deal with them. But the
Absolutely.
real issue here, is there. This is a setup for a regime change operation. It's a setup of intimidation. Historically, if we go back to 1864, there was an operation called Brother Sam, where the United States announced deployment of military warships to Brazil, and that was the green light for the Brazilian military to overthrow President Goulart. So when we see this operation coming, when we see that how it has no relation to where the actual drug flows are in the region, you understand that this is something else. As the previous guest was saying, the issue of the Nobel Peace Prize to leader of the opposition, just to show that this is part of a build up towards that. I think at the end, the United States is looking for some sort of internal breakdown in
Mhm.
Venezuela. This would scare the Venezuelan military, or this would cause some sort of commotion. But that's not reading the reality of Venezuela.
I,
Uh,
mhm.
Yeah.
I have two questions I want to throw at you. And you could answer them however you wish to. One is because there are some questions about who's supporting Venezuela, or where would Venezuela get any support from. If you had heard Chester earlier, Chester had mentioned that people in Grenada are saying, some people are saying, well, why don't you just give the Americans what they want, because you can't beat America. That's what some people would say on these small islands. So I just give them what they want. So here's my question. Is there any support that Venezuela can expect from China, Russia, if there's actually an intervention? And also, on top of that, there's a question that is popping up in my space where people talk all the time. This question is about the referendum in December of 2023 about the ownership of the Essequibo. And there are some corners and some sections of discussions where people are saying, if this is part of the reason why the United States really want to invade Venezuela or force regime change in Venezuela, because it's obvious if they have control of Venezuela, there's the Trinidad oil, there's the Guyana oil, there's the Venezuela oil. So do you think? Yeah,
Before Carlos comes in here, could I just say something?
sure.
Let's go right ahead.
All right. The Venezuela Guyana question
Yeah.
is really a red herring,
Okay.
and has been raised by those in Trinidad calculating to whip up the emotion and to tap into the emotions of Caribbean people
Yeah.
in respect to this issue concerning the Essequibo.
Ah,
The Americans are not here because of a dispute between Guyana and Venezuela over territory. The
yeah,
Americans have said why they're here. The
that's right.
Americans have said they're here to interdict drugs. That's what they've said. Now, let's back up a bit. In the 1899, 1898 settlement that went before the Court of Arbitration when Guyana was then a colony of the colony of Britain, and it was therefore known as British Guyana, there was a settlement of sorts. That issue remained dormant up until around 1962. And
Yeah,
the irony is, it was the Americans, in order to forestall the coming into office of Cheddi Jagan and the coming independence of Guyana
yeah.
from the British government, in order to forestall Cheddi Jagan from getting in, created internal turmoil with the CIA operating in conjunction with M16,
Correct.
right? Both the British and the Americans created disturbance in Guyana, and the American oil companies, then the dominant transnationals in control of Venezuelan carbohydrate resources, triggered this issue.
Okay.
Triggered this issue. That's how this issue started back. The
Well,
genesis of this issue.
yeah.
And let me just say this. Let me just say this. I think we need to make it absolutely clear.
I was gonna
It
tell you to
is
hold your point because I was telling you to hold your point because I think the our friend from Venezuela has to leave at 2:30, so we just want to get him to answer
no,
at
but you
least get.
see, what I don't, what I don't want
Uh-huh.
is for false narratives to be left unchecked.
Nobody. Well, I want to hear
Because
from his side, and we could always
okay,
discuss
fine.
your options. So let's because of his time constraints, we could always yeah, we could come back to that. Yeah, that's definitely yeah.
No, no. In this issue, I have to say, again, this is not the real reason why the U.S. is approaching Venezuela and the Caribbean.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I mean, you can even argue, for many years after the Geneva Agreement of 1966, Venezuela and Guyana have dealt this within the diplomatic framework, and there was no, and they dealt with this, of course, with disagreements, as each, of course, was going to have, but they dealt with this through diplomatic channels, and it was only when Exxon comes in, ExxonMobil in 2015, that this starts changing. But again, this has nothing to do with U.S. Now, the U.S. is interested in Venezuelan oil. Yes, I mean, Venezuela has the largest oil reserve in the world, proven reserves. Venezuela has other important resources, gold, other minerals, and that's definitely been the issue, because when Venezuela, since Venezuela started having an independent foreign policy, one that was not controlled or designed by Washington, one that was more open to partnerships with other countries in outside in the rest of the world, like China, Russia, Iran, etc. That definitely affects the U.S. Because the U.S. has always seen our region as its natural sphere of influence, as its natural, as a they call it a backyard, which is a terrible thing to say, but they have the feeling that it belongs somehow. It's somehow an
Yeah.
extension of the United States, and that's a real issue, because Venezuela having an independent foreign policy, an independent national policy, puts that into question. And in a time where the United States has lost, its hegemony over technological development, like in areas such as AI, semiconductors, all these things, when it has lost control over natural resources, when you have a grouping like BRICS suggesting that there could be a new financial architecture that may lower the dependence on the U.S. dollar, then the United States realizes that it has to put its orbit back together. It has to put its influence back together, and there Venezuela is a target. But it's not only Venezuela. I mean, if you look what else has been going on in the region, I mean, you just had the president of Argentina visit the White House, and President Trump say, "This is my candidate. You have to vote for him, otherwise I'll take the money away." So he's pressuring, the Argentinian electorate. He's blackmailing Brazil for taking a decision against Bolsonaro, who was an ally of his. He said at the beginning of this year that he wants to, he wanted to make Canada a 51st state, that he wants to take Greenland.
Yeah.
When you see overall what's going on, it's basically a recomposition of that, U.S. imposition over the region, and I think this is the real issue at hand. You asked about what other countries coming into the region. I think that's precisely what we have to avoid, and we must not think of this issue like in Cold War terms. Oh, here you're gonna split up the world in friends and enemies. No. I think we have to preserve the zone of peace of the Caribbean for sure. I think we have to. Venezuela. Yes, Venezuela has allies, has made many friends around the world. But we're not looking for war. We're not looking to fight this out. We don't want foreign countries to start getting involved. We want this to be preserved as a zone of peace, and for that we need to denounce this arbitrary incursion in the Caribbean, and we need to denounce the coercion that is trying to be imposed over Venezuela.
Yeah, sir, I know you have to leave soon, but I really would like to ask this particular question because we hear this a lot, especially from those who are Venezuelans who have left Venezuela, some of whom are living in Trinidad, some in Guyana, various parts of the Caribbean. And the narrative is this, or their experience is this, that they ran away from a dictatorship. They ran away from a very bad situation in Venezuela, where Maduro is, is a dictator, and that life is very, very hard for them in Venezuela. And so there is some Caribbean people who believe that regime change is necessary in Venezuela in order to free the people, in order for there to be true democracy in Venezuela. Can you shed some light on that, sir?
Well, first of all, anybody that thinks that a military invasion is going to somehow improve the life of the country must not have been paying attention to the last, 20 years of world history. We just had a tragic occupation of Afghanistan. We can go Iran, we could go to other places, but even our own history in Latin America has shown that U.S. invasion and takeover doesn't necessarily bring a golden era of wellness. Second of all, I think we have to understand that there's a buildup of narratives against Venezuela because of the reasons I explained before, because Venezuela set out to have an independent policy different from what the United States says. So throughout all these years, they've been accusing Venezuela of a whole type of different things.
But who are we're talking about now the people who have left. Like I had someone who we interviewed from Trinidad, and it's a Venezuelan, and it's saying something totally different from what you're saying. She was on the program last week.
Well, yes, but see, you have to understand, a country that gets hit with sanctions, where about 90% of your income gets destroyed because of U.S. sanctions. Of course, it's going to have economic problems. Of course, it's going to have some sort of tension. I don't agree with this idea of persecution or political persecution, because I think that is part of the narrative. Because for many, there's a reality that many of our people that have been forced to migrate because of this the sanctions and all these economic attacks on Venezuela. One of the things they look one of the tools they employ when they reach some of the countries is to say, well, if I claim to be part of trying to escape a political persecution, that would ease my way into establishing myself in a new living. This is exactly what happens in the United States. People come and just claim asylum and then try to ease their process. But regardless of all this, the issues of Venezuelan democracy, the differences that we may have with Venezuelans with our peers, they cannot be solved from outside with an intervention. They must be solved within Venezuela.
Within,
We have a system. We have an electoral system. We have different tools. But in any case, none of this can justify a military intervention on Venezuela, the forceful overthrow of the government. And again, nobody in their sane mind can think that a military intervention against Venezuela could somehow improve the conditions of living of anybody in this country.
Yeah, one of the viewers has a comment there because again we've been doing these shows, and the Venezuelans that we've had the opportunity to speak to are those that have left Venezuela, and the picture they paint of President Maduro is one as a monster. The narrative is that he's a dictator, and not just what we're hearing from Trump, but we're hearing from Venezuelans. Can you what can you say to our viewer here who's genuinely asking a question?
Well, again, I think this is part of a narrative. I mean, obviously, you don't necessarily have to agree with the policies of someone when they're within a democracy. So you're always going to have in Venezuela people that are on the opposition. But what's interesting is that there are many people in the opposition here, living here in Venezuela,
Yes,
that would come and say, that they have joined the National Council for Peace and Sovereignty and said, even though we have differences with President Maduro, we are against an invasion, we are against a military operation in Venezuela because we want to defend our land. And whatever issues we have, we solve amongst each other here in Venezuela. So I think, I don't think there's an important support for President Maduro. It's a process that has been going on for 26 years. First with President Chavez, then continue with President Maduro. It's a very popular support. There's a lot of popular support. You have to. Anybody has to see that. You see it with the communes, the growing structures of people's power on organizing and backing the government. Even the enlisting in a militia to defend the country in case of an attack. I mean, that shows more national cohesion. So I think these are all part of the narratives, again, attempting to criminalize Maduro. One of the things that we have seen this year, in particular, is that the attack from Washington is not only criminalizing the president, because they've raised the bounty for him in the Department of Justice. They have accused him of being a drug trafficker and a gang member and all these things. But now they've also included all Venezuelans into this list. We saw, they revived the 1798 Aliens Enemies Act in order to criminalize all Venezuelan migrants in the United States. And under this law, they're saying that any Venezuelan who has a tattoo, who looks suspicious, they consider gang members. 252 people were deported to El Salvador, to something like a concentration camp, without any due process, just because they decided to criminalize the Venezuelan population. So I think when we look at the whole picture, we understand this is a process against Venezuela and against the Venezuelan people, because it was an easy target for Trump, or it was the one he picked. I don't know, but the thing is, that it is all part of the same narrative against Venezuela, the president, Venezuelan people, everyone.
Right. And I know Mr. Humphrey is ready to go, but my very, very final question, you did say a certain time. I still have a little more time with you, two or three more minutes. Let me ask you something about China and Russia, because there's also the thinking that, well, who is coming to save you now? China and Russia. And I'm just being very blunt with you today, because we have you on the program and we want to know what's the sentiment in Venezuela? Do you feel that China and Russia are going to come to assist you just in case Trump said, brings the troop on the ground and comes to, invade Venezuela?
Look, like I said before, I think the sentiment is that we don't want a conflict. that we're not asking for anyone to come in and participate in a conflict. We want to avoid this idea. You know,
Mhm.
the fact that we've had very good relationship with both those countries. Both those
Yeah.
countries have had a firm stand in international fora, and have said, we are against the hostilities towards Venezuela. We're against any violation of Venezuelan sovereignty, but we're not looking for a military conflict. We're not inviting anybody to come and to be part of a military
Are you
conflict. We're looking for
preparing? You're not
peace.
looking for it, but
Yeah.
are you preparing?
Oh, Venezuela counts on Venezuela. Venezuela counts with our military, with our people, with our armed force, with our weapons. That, because that's, at the end of the day, that's who you count on. You rely on yourself. You don't have to. We don't have to call for anybody to come in. But I think what I would ask, though, what I would say is that anybody in the Caribbean, anybody in the region, must take a stand against military intervention in Venezuela, because it's an aggression against all of us. Disrupting peace in Venezuela is a disruption for the whole region. It's a disruption for everyone. So, we're not looking for conflict, but we must all stand and denounce any attempts to promoting it.
Yes. Wow. Well, sir, thank you so much for being with us. I know we went over time, but it's been a real education for us, and we hope you'll be able to come back as we have more questions. I'd rather ask you directly than hold. We're hearing from
Sure.
Western media, so it's an honor to have you here,
Well, my
sir. Is
pleasure.
there
Thank you very
anything
much.
else? Is there anything else you feel like you want to say to? Because we have people watching from St. Vincent, from Trinidad, from Jamaica, from Barbados. Is there anything else you think you want to say to
No,
us?
I think, to for everybody to realize, Venezuelans consider all the people from the Caribbean to be our brothers and sisters. We want to always uh, to fight to strengthen that unity amongst ourselves, and we hope that that in a moment like this, we find a way to again denounce intervention, so that we could guarantee that our region is a region of peace.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carlos Ron. And let's not be strangers.
Thank you.
We're going to call on you again. Thank you very much. God bless. Yes. Bye bye. Yes, Senator Chester Humphrey, I can see you're raring to go, and we welcome your comments. For those of you who are just joining us, Senator Chester Humphrey is Grenadian, and he's been giving us a lot of information, lots of education coming from this man. So I'm just gonna shut up and let him go. Go ahead, Senator Humphrey.
Yes, thank you. Just to say to my Barbadian neighbors that as General Secretary of the Caribbean Congress of Labor for two successive terms, my office was in the NUPW building.
Ah,
And yes, so I
two
used to be in
years. Oh wow.
Barbados almost every other week. Um, and until, of course, we set up the Secretariat Independent of the NUPW headquarters for the Caribbean Congress of Labor, which was based there then. Also, that my brother-in-law, that is my biggest sister, husband is Barbadian, and I have very good and working close relationships with the Barbados Workers Union, Soroy, Bobby Morris,
Yes.
Bobby Clark, Bobby
Mhm.
Clark, David Commission, David Denny. So a whole stream of people in Barbados. And of course, I served as chairman of the LIAT group of unions when year then chairman Dr. Holder was chairman of LIAT. So I have a whole plethora. This is why I refer to Barbados as part of the neighborhood in respect of myself. And then my uncle was a very distinguished banker with Barclays and was based in Barbados for many years. My uncle married the sister of Morris Bishop, so we have had an in-law relationship. Yeah, so I just thought I would say, as you described me, that I am part of the Barbados neighborhood, and that neighborhood just extends in
Well,
Grenada.
well,
So I just
we're
thought I would
totally
make that
happy.
known.
We're totally happy to have you, and we're extending our program another 10 minutes. So we're going to finish at 2:30, because we have you on, and we would love to hear what what else you have to say. So we have 10 minutes to wrap it up. And again,
Yeah.
over to you,
Well,
sir.
I think it has become manifestly clear by the work like people like yourself and Ernesto have been doing that what we're witnessing unfolding by the Americans here has very little to do with the narco trade and much to do with the American preparation for a military intervention. I did point out why it was they wanted Grenada in particular because of Grenada's geographic location and the repositioning of the satellite tree that is required to guide these highly sophisticated munitions, primarily the cruise missiles. All right.
Mhm.
Now, as I said, there is a minority, a minuscule opinion in Grenada um, that is of the view that we should prostitute. It's okay if you want food, then you prostitute. There's that view. As I say,
Yes.
it's a minuscule view, but it's a view that needs to be addressed. And that Grenada has a golden opportunity for removing all of these sanctions against it, and that it will get visa free travel to get into the United States. I mean, what other rubbish? Man can't live by bread alone, man can't live without principle, right? And the question is it's something I have said before. Once you begin to run from a bully, be prepared to be a
Keep running.
long distance
Keep
runner
running. Keep running. Yeah.
because you will be forever running.
Correct.
Having
Correct.
said that, it was soon revealed by the Attorney General that the Americans came knocking again. They want Grenada to accept foreign deportees from countries whom we don't know. So you see, and I posit the question to those who are calling for us to enter the prostitution trade.
Yeah.
What would be your response? Because they create a fair machine, and this fair machine is, oh, Grenada tourism go shut down. We're not going to be able to export because Americans are threatening to stop the export of our fish, which is our most lucrative market. So
Yes.
we won't be able to do any of these things. So we ought to go to bed with Trump. So I said to them, simply put, all right. So we go to bed with Trump. The Americans come knocking again. And lo and behold, the Americans did come knocking. According to the Attorney General, the Senator Claudette Joseph, the Americans made a request for us to receive deportees from foreign countries. No. So the individual who was spouting this unprincipled, opportunist, prostitutional philosophy, I said, so what would you do when the Americans come knocking? And indeed they did. What would be your response? And his immediate response is, no, 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 no. Grenada can't take anybody else. We are a small country. And so I said, but my friend, I said to you before, if you start a run, be prepared to be a long distance runner. Because if you don't concede to Trump's threat, the threat of not giving you visas, the threat of banishing your fish, the threat of closing down your tourism, the threat
Yeah.
of closing down the St. George's University, the threat
Correct.
is still there.
Correct.
So if
Correct.
you don't comply, does that. And I say, okay. So you comply with that. The next request is Grenada to what would be your response? You see, what I'm trying to do is simply this. There comes a time, and I don't want to be gender biased, but I'm just speaking the way I know. There comes a time when a man or a people have to stand on principle. There
Yeah.
comes a time when, so for example, during the struggle, the anti-slavery struggle, there were slaves who did not want slavery to end. Those
Correct.
who were the house slaves, and
Correct.
those
Correct.
house slaves who were close to the master,
Yes.
came up with all kinds of fears. Well, if slavery ends, where are we going to sleep? How are we going to get food? What is going to happen to us? Blah, 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 blah. And they stood against the abolition of slavery. Let's move fast forward to apartheid. The Botolezis, right, formed an alliance with the apartheidist government to block the dismantling of apartheid. America blocked the dismantling of apartheid. The British blocked the dismantling of apartheid. But you know what? Apartheid was removed. Apartheid was dismantled. Of course, of course, um, oppression. And for those who believe in the philosophy of a superior race, and that is all of Western Europe, are of the view and they recalibrate themselves. So that while the worst features of apartheid in its political sense has disappeared, but its economic sense has remained. And the challenge for Africans today is how we dismantle economic apartheid,
Mhm.
right? But the fact of the matter is, no one can doubt that the step forward to gain our freedom when Nelson Mandela came out of prison and assumed the presidency. This was a great moment. It was
Yeah,
not the final moment. We still have to continue the struggle.
correct.
We still have to continue the struggle until Western Europe and its extended enclaves, built on slavery and native genocide, because that's how Australia came into being. They
Yep,
committed genocide and a holocaust against the Aboriginal people. They did the
correct.
Mhm.
same thing in St. Vincent. They did the same thing in New Zealand. They did the same thing in Canada. And they did the same thing in the so-called United States,
Yep,
right? And so the question is, where do we stand on the horizons of these issues? And therefore, there are greater principles. And we ought not to face the future with fear, but to face the future with confidence, driven by principles. And what better principle is there than the principle of respect of the human dignity of man? There is no greater principle, right? And the relevance and the profundity of the principle of of the Caribbean being a zone of peace. It is precisely that principle that Dr. Ralph Gonzalez invoked and was able to get an agreement in Argyle. Not a perfect agreement, not a foolproof agreement, but an
nope,
agreement nonetheless that has settled the situation
yep,
between Venezuela and Guyana, such that Guyana still exercises sovereignty over the Essequibo. Venezuela still makes the claim, but there is no case of war between them based on this principle. So when the drunk talks about Caribbean never knew peace, and we can't subscribe to that principle because we have crime. I
was clearly
mean,
joke.
no, I expect a drunk to think that way because
Yes,
they're drunk.
Oh
yes.
God.
They're
I think
drunk
Oh
because
no.
this
My
principle,
goodness.
this
yes, Aubrey.
this
Oh,
this principle,
just to hit
this
it right.
principle has absolutely nothing to do with domestic murders,
Just to hit the hammer right
right?
on the nail head.
Has absolutely nothing. You see, we are facing an existential threat to our region, and therefore we have to call a spade a spade.
Spade is
I,
spade.
I will not be imprisoned by diplomatic niceties. I'm sorry. Well, not that I'm sorry, but I won't be proscribed by diplomatic niceties. I calling a spade as I
A
see it,
spade.
and I
Yep.
call in those treacherous leaders amongst us. And let's be clear on that. I will not engage in the tomfoolery of the Caribbean people. We are still in the throes of the march of emancipation. We are at a different phase in the
Yeah.
emancipation
Um.
process.
Yeah. Well, I have to
Yeah.
leave. Um. I have to leave
Well,
and
like
and and
myself
and
too, I have to
and
leave as
um
well.
Well,
yeah.
well, let's officially close the
Chester
program.
has to come back for part two. Chester has to come back for part two.
Definitely part two. And
Um.
yes.
I want to say something. Chester made a very, very important point.
But you gonna say
I
something first and don't say anything afterwards.
I no, just no, we're finished. We're finished. I keep making this point all the time on videos I do. You see this house slave issue that we're in, we need to get out of the house slave mood. And also, I said before Chester came on, I'm not sure if Chester heard me, I said that we have to have leaders now who will have to consider if a visa to the United States is important or if rebuilding regional travel and regional economies is more important. I also said that we'll have to have leaders now who will consider if planting our own food on these rocks that are so fertile, right, is more important than bringing in billions of dollars worth of unhealthy food from the United States of America, sending out billions of dollars that we don't have in the Caribbean. That is the kind of leadership we want right now. Leaders have to start using their minds. They have to start thinking, visa, we can leave the visa behind. We can travel in the region and build these economies. Plant food, abscond the unhealthy food, because they're the same leaders who come back and tell you, that hypertension, diabetes, and all kind of non-communicable diseases are high in the region. I have to spend so much money in the healthcare system. You know why? Because we're importing the dirty food. I'm up north in tins, in tin can. That's what we eat into. But we could do better than that. So that's the kind of leadership we want. No. So Humphrey's right on the ball. Right on the ball. No drunkards, no traitors, sober-minded people, no house slaves for leaders. Absolutely. Thank you very much, Chester.
Well, thank you all so much, and Chester, we'd love to have you back because I want to know what you call Edward Seaga, what did you call Tom Adams, what did you call all of these others who took principal positions. They took positions with the U.S. So I want to have that conversation because it's not just Kamla. And that's where I want to end today. And so, guys, see you all next week. And I hope we're booking Chester Humphrey to be
we want
back
Chester back for part two. Part two.
Yeah.
All right.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you, Marcia. Thank you, Ernesto.
All right.
And have a wonderful evening.
Okay.
And to all my Bajan neighbors, I can't call everybody. I want to say as the young people say, I want to big you up, whatever that means.
Yes.
That's right.
Well, we receive
Okay, thank you very much.
God bless. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.